Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar with WCASA. For those who might not know me, my name is Sarah Lawton. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a prevention coordinator with WCASA. I'll go ahead and let my colleagues and the leads of this amazing project take a moment to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nestic Morris, and I'm the outreach coordinator here at WCASA. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Justine Rufus. I serve as the rule coordinator for WCASA. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm really excited about this topic today, talk about family-friendly workplaces.
Yes, so exactly as Justine said, we're going to be chatting about how policies in the workplace at the local level can be used as a violence prevention mechanism, why they are best practice for individuals, the community, the workplace at large, and what you can do at your organization to make your workspace safer, healthier, and better for families. So without further ado, a good place to start is just understanding the definition of what makes a workplace family friendly, right? What do we mean when we say family friendly? And anyway, we know that it's more than just PTO packages, right? A family friendly workplace is recognizing that workers show up to the office as whole people. They might be caregivers for young children, for elderly parents, or for their partners who might be living with chronic illness, right? They may be active leaders within their communities, which calls for them to be available to other community members at a moment's notice at any hour of the day. They may be experiencing a big loss or in the middle of a lot of grief. Whatever it looks like, our lives as individuals don't exist in isolation. We don't get to check out our personal, right, life at the door whenever we clock in. For instance, I am a mom to a young toddler. He just turned 1. And when I'm checking my emails or preparing a slide deck for a training, I'm still his mom, right? I can press pause for a few hours during the workday. What about when he's sick or in the middle of the night when he can't sleep? Do you think that he knows or understands that it's 3 a.m., which is not an ideal time for me to be awake? No, I'm still on mom duty, and that's going to inevitably carry over into my work life, right? I'm showing up at work both as a member of this team, but also as a parent, which is why I am so grateful that I work for an agency that understands that and supports it. They get that I'm a whole person, not just an employee. And they strive to provide an environment that allows me to be a whole person, both a member of the WCASA team and my son's mother. So why do family-friendly workplaces matter? There's more positives than people realize, right? For one thing, it's good for the workplace itself. It's good for business. An agency that protects and upholds family-friendly policies is more likely to attract stronger talent, retain their staff. They're also actively cultivating an environment that's better for everyone for being supportive and equitable. So it's a great way to signal your values and truly show respect for your team's identity, their individuality, their personal lives, and their needs. It's also really good for our community, right? Because it's sharing out to your larger community. This is what we care about. This is what we protect and uphold. It's our values. And that's going to trickle into folks who are interacting with your business, whether they work there, whether they're patrons, right? There is ongoing effect outside of just the organization. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Did you know that family-friendly workplaces, especially paid family leave, is an effective strategy for violence prevention? Here's a little flow chart to illustrate this. Okay, let's say you live in a town called Smithville, and the community in Smithville is really wonderful. Folks hold really positive and affirming values. They value anti-racism. They value feminism, inclusion, accessibility. They believe in a strong social support for children, for trans folks, for immigrants, for parents, for the disability community. In short, their shared community values contribute to the general conduct within Smithville, which, as you can see, is a really supportive environment. So it would make sense that the organizations that operate within Smithville, so retail, restaurants, social services, schools, healthcare, government, you name it, are going to be influenced by the shared social norms and community values that we just spoke about. The policies of those organizations are likely going to reflect those values. So for instance, because Smithville really values identity affirmation, it wouldn't be a surprise if many of the organizations Many of the organizations and businesses within Smithville had dress code policies, for example, that embrace gender expression or cultural tradition. The policies set the tone for the workspace and ultimately will impact every worker, every patron, every volunteer interacting with that organization. Shared values are going to inform the policy. Policy then shapes the environment, which can create tangible impacts. So now let's consider paid family leave specifically. Starting here with community values, right? Smithville values gender equity, economic equity, and family connectivity and supports. Smithville businesses, schools, healthcare organizations implement policies that support these values, including paid family leave, leading us here, right? These policies, like paid family leave, make a tangible difference in terms of economic supports for women and children, as well as promoting a protective, supportive work environment. We know that both of those things, economic supports for women and girls and protective environments, are meaningful strategies for sexual violence prevention. And the line doesn't end there, right? In some ways, this is sort of a chicken and egg situation because policies reinforce and feed into the social environment of Smithville. So in some ways, right, like I said, it's chicken and egg because the social norms are informing the policy and the policy then reinforces and continues to shape those social norms. I hope that this really just goes to show that family-friendly workplaces are more than just good for your workplace's retention, staff happiness, right? It's great for the whole community and a powerful opportunity to prevent violence. So now Justine's going to talk a little bit about workplace policy having to do with our specific field with wellness and safety and how family-friendly workplaces are super meaningful in our particular field.
So why do workplace matter in our field? I think it's important to know that staff in sexual assault and domestic violence programs experience high emotional labor and secondary trauma. So we in our field are very aware of the stresses that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And so it really matters, especially in our field, to have a safe, supportive work environment for staff retention, morale, and a quality of survivor services. If we have a team that's supporting the work that we do, it directly impacts the services that we provide. It impacts the survivors that receive services from our organizations. Wellness-focused workplaces reduce burnout and they increase long-term sustainability.
All right, so now diving into different paid policy types, paid options that workplaces can implement both for staff wellness, to be more supportive of families, right, to promote best practice and really protect our community. We're going to be talking about more than just paid family leave. There are different paid leave options that workplaces can implement.
And so the first one that we're going to talk about is bereavement leave. And according to Indeed.com, it is a workplace policy that provides time off for employees following the loss of a family member or friend. Studies show, well, the study shows that bereavement and death, long bereavement is what it's called, can lead to things such as depression, anxiety, also talks about drug and alcohol misuse and abuse. And there are also that same study talks about how oftentimes people will attempt or complete suicide ideations. And so we're going to talk about how bereavement policies can literally save the lives of your employees. Next slide, Sarah. So while doing some research, and when I say research, it's not Google, just asked the folks around me, like, what is your bereavement or death policies that you have at your workplace? And for the most part, everybody had between 3 to 4 days for bereavement. That's literally like 3 to 4 business days to get over the loss of someone that you loved. And so, and then a lot of other people gave me like specifics. And so some family, some workplaces had 4 days for a spouse or a kid, 3 days for an extended family, and that was a parent, grandparent, parent, or sibling. And the last one was 1 day for a cousin, sibling, or an uncle. It's usually on a case by case basis. And I didn't really love that because the workplace gets to decide what folks say is family. It doesn't address chosen family. It doesn't address maybe adopted family or things along those lines. And so those were, with the exception of there's another place that I interviewed and asked them about their work policy, their bereavement workplace policy, and they gave 80 hours of bereavement, and you can take it straight out, or if you need a day or two while you are grieving the loss of somebody that you know, you can take them in separate days. And so I thought that that was amazing. And while I know that we probably in our field don't have that option, we can talk about, you can go to the next slide, Sarah. Talk about the flexibility of what it looks like. Justine often talks about how being able to be flexible when it comes to your policies. And we want to think about what that looks like for bereavement. We often say that, sexual assault and domestic violence are not one size fit all. And so we want to be rethinking what bereavement policies look like. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we also want to think about considering what family dynamics look like. We shouldn't be the ones choosing what that looks like. Um, Oregon is the only state that requires 2 weeks of paid bereavement leave. And we're thinking about the safety and the wellness of the people that we're working with. And so we want to think about how we can be flexible, especially when it comes to um, grief and death and what that looks like. 4 days is not enough to get over the death of a parent or a child or anything like that. And so we want to be thinking about what that would look like and what policies you can put in place to help the people that you're working with. Next slide, Sarah.
So the other kind of paid leave that we wanted to chat about.
I'm wondering if I could just say something about the bereavement real quick too, because
Absolutely.
thinking about the bereavement even culturally, is really important. So like
Mhm.
I was telling nestic in tribal communities and different tribes, we have, and all of us, each tribe is not the same. We
Mhm.
all have our own culture, our own beliefs. But like in tribal communities, our process for grief and traditionally is 7 days. Like the journey, like we believe there's a spiritual journey, there's a whole lot of things that go along with that. And so, like, if you had a policy for me in particular, that wouldn't even allow me to participate in the rest of the ceremony that we were having for grief. And then thinking about it, our team here at WCASA have had some losses. I lost my husband. I know that we've had some really intimate losses here, but that year, comes up and we think about that. And
Mhm.
so, like, thinking bereavement beyond just that initial grief, and I like the
Yep.
fact that, like, you can take that whenever, but what happens in a year anniversary of
Yep.
that death or
Yep.
the birthday or the,
Yep.
the holidays? So, thinking about that beyond just that initial pain of loss,
Mhm.
it comes and goes, like, especially
Mhm.
that time of year, that month, checking in with staff to say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? We putting it on your calendar so you know if they're having a rough month or a rough week, they've lost their child. I know one of my friends, she lost her child years ago. She, and she still that week grieves
Mhm.
the death of her son. So thinking about that beyond just the policy, what does
Yep.
it look like and how are you treating your employee that's experiencing that loss. So
Mhm.
I think that's when we're talking about really creating an environment that supports and cares, right? So
Yeah,
it's really important.
that's important. And also, um, when I was in college, I had a professor that asked for a obituary for people that needed to take time off from class. And I just thought it was the absolute rudest thing to request an obituary for somebody who's dealing with grief. And we don't want to be thinking about, oh, I gotta bring my employer, because honestly, we felt like she thought that we were lying when people were saying that, oh, I have a funeral to go to, like blah 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 blah. And so we don't want to be doing things like that. Like, we don't want to add extra grief onto somebody who's already dealing with grief and loss. And when we talk about grief and bereavement, we're also talking about not just somebody that passed away. We're talking about pregnancy losses, and non-death losses. And so whether that is you had a medical procedure, or if maybe even a divorce, so non-death policies as well.
So, in addition to having compassionate and flexible, accommodating bereavement leave, another policy that we were able to implement here at WCASA and that we really encourage other organizations to think about implementing is paid parental leave, right? Paid family leave. This is a really valuable and important policy or benefit to be able to provide. We also understand that it's very rarely offered and really difficult to provide. So, the United States is the only industrialized, modernized nation, right, that does not have paid family leave program in place. This is disappointing. It's shameful. It is also not surprising. So what the federal level currently provides is 12 weeks of unpaid leave for organizations with 50 employees or more. Smaller agencies can comply with the federal mandate, but are not required to, right? Oftentimes referred to as FMLA, or is FMLA, not just referred to. Where does that actually leave new parents, right, who are managing a massive life change, oftentimes a medically complex recovery, emotional, financial, and physical exhaustion, no paycheck for 3 months, and the expectation to return to normal life in 12 weeks as if this is a tidy process, right? This is not best for anyone. This is not best for the recovery of the birthing parent. This is not best for the bonding of the child with their parents. This is not best for the support of the family. And this is not best for the well-being of the child. I want to be clear that we recognize the need to implement wide-scale paid family leave is the responsibility of the federal government, right? Until that day comes, we are asking agencies to step in where they can to do better for their team and ultimately for their community. Because again, as we saw at the beginning of the presentation, it's not just a one-off of who benefits from this, right? This is best for that entire family. This is best for the agency. This is best for the whole community. It's also, as I mentioned at the top, good for businesses. Agencies are more likely to retain their staff if their team knows that their workplace will support them when welcoming a new child, right? It protects institutional knowledge and longevity. It even saves you money, right? It's worth it. So what do agencies need to bear in mind if they are thinking about trying to put some kind of paid parental leave in place? For one thing, the most important thing, how large is your organization? Because if you employ more than 50 people at any given time, you will be required to make sure that any policy you implement is in alignment with state and federal standards and FMLA. But if you're feeling overwhelmed beyond that, right, here are some basic questions that we encourage folks to start with. We appreciate that this can be really complex and overwhelming, so let's just make our way through the list, right? How large is your agency? How many people could your agency afford to support taking paid family leave at the same time? What would you like the eligibility requirements to be, right? Will this be available to folks who work part-time, who work full-time, who were just hired, who have been there at least a month? What is the maximum number of weeks that an employee can take? How long can the leave be supported for? How will the employee's workload be managed in their absence? So what's the work management plan? And how can the organization support employees when they return to work? Because speaking from experience, you will want to make sure that the person returning, and I'm so lucky to have had this, will have a lot of grace, a lot of support, and sort of an easy, it's sort of re-onboarding in many ways, a reboarding, a re-onboarding of that employee after their leave. Other things to consider when you're drafting your parental leave policy. These are called the three E's. And while I'm discussing them in terms of paid family leave, I think that these can be extended to any paid leave that you want to write into your organization. So I think this also applies to bereavement. This also applies to flexible observances, which Justine will be talking about in just a moment. This isn't exclusive to paid family leave, but let's talk about it within this context. The first and most important, not the first, not the most important, but the first E, easy to use, right? So is your process straightforward? Is your parental leave clearly laid out in your employee handbook? So what we don't want, lots of contingencies, fine print, hoops to jump
Mhm.
through. To the best of your ability, you want the policy to be easy to understand, very accessible, so employees know exactly where to go to find the information about it, and to put to use. For instance, have a pre-drafted blank application page for an employee to fill out when they're applying for paid family leave. Have a pre-prepared work coverage plan, like a blank template that employees can fill out for their plan of their tasks, duties, and responsibilities, deadlines, right? How is the work going to be managed their time away? Make it as easy as possible for staff to understand and utilize. The second E, make it equitable for all parents. What this really means. Paid family leave should be for all parents and any conditions. My husband was not the birthing parent when our son was born, but his firm still gave him 3 months of paid family leave because that's their policy for all parents welcoming new kiddos. Further, we don't want the policy to be limited to families welcoming a child by birth because families grow in a multitude of ways. We need to make sure that this policy covers families who are adopting, who are fostering, right? Whatever the context in which they are welcoming this child, we want this policy to be accessible to them. As far as the pay parameters, right? 8 weeks of full pay, followed by 4 weeks at 70%, 12 weeks at full pay, or 16 weeks at 60%. Whatever it is that your agency decides to employ, you just want to make sure that the policy applies across the board to any employee, regardless of whether they're the birthing parent or not. And the last one, enough time, right? The final E, enough time. Be flexible. This is admittedly really hard to define. According to the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, paid family leave should be at the bare minimum 8 weeks. And I really debated whether or not I should even share that number with folks because from my personal experience, that is nowhere near enough time. Not enough time. Now, maybe being able to provide some paid leave is better than providing none. I want to be clear that we are not asking agencies to figure out how to provide 12 months paid leave, right? As amazing as that would be, we know that that's not necessarily and very rarely actually possible. So we want to encourage you to figure out a creative policy that is feasible for your agency, but also really supportive of the new parent, right? So enough time is amorphous, but we want to consider all the things that could be going on for the team member who's taking that leave. Are they the birthing parent? What if they experience a complication during delivery that makes their recovery even more challenging? What if they have a medically complex pregnancy that requires them to start their leave before their child is born? What if their child needs to spend extensive time in the NICU? What if they're the partner to a birthing parent and this is their second child and their partner needs an emergency C-section while they have a toddler at home, right? This is also only circumstances for couples who are welcoming kiddos via birth, right? There's an entirely separate set of considerations and needs for families who might be adopting or fostering a child. Each situation is going to be really different. So defining enough time is tricky. That's why flexibility is really important, right? Justine and Nestic have already named this. We don't want the flexibility to also end just around the arrival of the little one. Having flexible paid family leave means that we allow for unplanned elements of welcoming a child and of parenting. So that can include what does the return to work look like? Is it staggered return? Is there flexible scheduling, remote work? What are the options to make this time as available and usable to the new parents, but also manageable for your agency? We want to anticipate that flexibility will be required. And for our next paid leave, Justine was going to talk about this, about flexible observances.
Yeah, so even using the term is intentional, right? So we're thinking about our staff and our diversity in staff, right? We want to make sure that we're fostering an environment that is diverse, that we have a workplace that's comfortable for everyone, but even being intentional about the words is important, the language, right? So not like Wakasa was very intentional and had much discussion when we were developing our policy, even prior to my employment here, about not calling them holidays because not every religious background celebrates holidays. Being intentional and calling it a flexible observance. So, in place of the standard federal holiday schedule, organizations allow each staff, and we do this here at WCASA. I'm very proud of this, and it really works for all of us, but to select our own observances. So, we get a certain amount of days and at the beginning of the year, and sometimes we all forget to turn it in on time, but at the beginning of the year, so they can put it into our payroll system, they say to us, hey, what are your holidays going to be this year? And there's no limits on that. We could put 7 of them in a row and make an entire week holiday. We could, so we get a certain amount of days and then we get to pick what days we want off. Some can still follow federal holidays. Some of us are more intentional on our cultural background. You know, we have a treaty day you can take off for my culture. Um, Anything that you wanted to put in your observance. So it's also important to, like I said, to be intentional about the language, making sure that cultures don't, like I said, they don't have holidays. So thinking about all of those things, is really important. And this policy would be important to make sure that all of your staff is included if you're changing policy, to have those discussions like, how many days do you need for a celebration that you have? Or so allowing those to be clumped together is really important in some cases because celebrations may happen in some cultures for more than one day. So I think that when we're thinking about that, it's really important to be flexible. So there's some key um, components. Each employee may choose up to a certain amount of days um, for their personal, and that can include things like there. I know a lot of, if there is a certain time of year that each one of the tribes have a powwow or um, a seasonal ceremony, so allowing them to take off during that time is really important. I don't know if you've ever gone to a powwow or participating, even making the regalia, like they're working on that for like a week before the powwow. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into that preparation of that ceremony. So thinking about that, different cultures celebrate New Year's differently. Different times of the year is certain celebrations. I know. So thinking about all of those key components and um, national days, our days doesn't match necessarily what another country does. So if you have someone from a different country, they have celebrations in different times of the year. So like I said, the employees submit their dates in advance. And also allowing some of these to be flexible, right? That flexibility is really what makes this a workplace. Say I put my holidays in, but suddenly I forgot that I was to participate in an elder ceremony, or and you know, in my, we don't get to say no in my community when we're asked by an elder to do something. And so thinking about that, can it be flexible that I would say, hey, I forgot that I was committed to this um, cultural event, and maybe you're asked to speak there. Maybe you're asked to do some, um, cook for a feast, or there's some other reason that you'll be asked to be pulled away to that event. So being supportive of that is really important, and no explanation. Um, Even our PTO, like, I once said that one of the employees made up an excuse, like, I just can't see myself coming to work today. Like, can't we just say that instead of the lie, like, I'm really sick or I don't feel well. So, it's not that. If you have PTO time, you take it. There's no explanation to that. And I think by law, there's some legal things, but I don't really get into that. It's just, I think it's more important to think about our staff and really not requiring any of those things, not requiring, like Nestic said, evidence or proof. Um, that is a much different way that your employees take that, and it doesn't create a family friendly workplace, right? So it's important to make sure that we're really intentional about being flexible.
You might be thinking, I know that a lot of our membership is made up of small organizations, And the notion of implementing 3 new kinds of paid leave at once is really overwhelming. There's also zero cost ways to make your workplace more accommodating, equitable, and safe for families, for members of your community. And Justine is going to talk about that now.
Yeah, so I think through this project, we really wanted to create some tangibles, right? We wanted to create some actual policy templates that we could share with organizations, even beyond what our field, we're going to be handing this to DHS and hopefully they'll be spreading that out to other community workers, right? Like Sarah started in the beginning, policies impact community, our health, the way that we show up to work, the way that we show up at home, the way that we show up in the community, um, really isn't creates an impact on our larger environment, right? Beyond us, beyond work. And so really thinking about how we create these really healthy work environment creates a healthy community is really important. So I think that one of the things that I looked at is like what makes a good workplace. So Megan's gonna be proud of me because I looked at some data. It's our little evaluator. And I was like, oh, okay, what did most people say? And most people, number one thing is what makes an employee want to stay in their job, right? Where they work. And it was supportive leadership. And I think the term, I once went to, this was back in my CDFI Community Development Financial Institution days. I always say it's really weird, my career path, because I started out in business and real estate and then kind of went into nonprofit. And so I have a really weird background, but I got to attend a conference years ago, and we had this really, it was a huge conference. It was all these bankers, financial folks, right? And we had a really big CEO come and do a presentation. And it's something that I've always remembered throughout my career, right? Is creating that term leadership. What does that mean? Beyond, um, so he went up and did a speech about what makes um his organization folks want to show up at work, right? Motivated to work, motivated to do the job. And he said something that I'll never forget, and because it really resonated with myself and my culture and my traditional beliefs, right? So there's a whole lot that resonated with me. But he said, nobody wants to work for the boss. You ever hear that saying, like, you're not the boss of me? Nobody wants to work for a boss. What employees want to do is they want to work for a leader. And what makes good leadership? It's not about I'm the king of the hill, right? I'm the top of the heap. It's a leadership is about folks wanting to go to work and wanting to work hard for you. And what motivates people to work hard? And that's to show by example, right? It's to walk with humility. It's to not think that you're better than anyone else in your organization. It's to want to come to work. We've all gone to jobs where we just didn't want to roll out of bed. And you can't believe that I have to go to work today. And he said, ask yourself, is that where your work is? Or do you have somewhere where people want to get up and are motivated to come to work and show up? Those are the folks that are going to really do the job, right? And so that always resonated because he talked about humility, which is a core value, and walking with humility. Like no job is better than, and I think about my tradition, my past, my culture, right? Like we lived communally. We lived together. We all had a job. Yes, the hunter got the big deer and there was a seller, like great, he got a deer, but somebody had to stoke the fire, right? They had to cook the deer. And no job was more important than the other for us to eat. We all had a place in that. So supportive leadership is about being compassionate and caring. So we want to talk more about just the policy, right? It's about creating that environment, accountability and transparency, and that's for us as leaders. Supervisors prioritizing staff's well-being, and I know Sarah did a really good job of explaining that, along with Nestic, alongside program outcomes. Right, there is no the program, the deliverables come first. It's prioritizing staff's well-being as well. It's clear communication around decision and expectations and change. And leadership is about modeling healthy work culture. You know, walk your talk. It's really important to not only implement policies, but it's really about creating that supportive work environment, that really healthy workplace. And I really didn't know until I came to WCASA. Like, I was in toxicity for a very long time in my workplaces. Like, until I worked in somewhere that I was unaware of how unhealthy some of the places that I worked were until you see that through the lens of a very healthy work culture. So it's really important to constantly question that and to make sure that you're on that path of creating this and really good work environment. Supportive leadership strengthens trust and retention and sustainability. I'll tell you what, it doesn't like I know that we're talked about paid leave and that's intentional about creating that supportive work environment both at work and in the workplace, and that's very important. But even more important, I think, is to think about, are we creating that environment that we have built trust? I don't have to lie to my supervisors when I have something going on. I can be really honest about what's happening in my life. And are we creating a environment that wants folks to come to work, right? That wants to create that does create sustainability because they don't want to leave. And I think that you've accomplished something if you create that environment.
I think that's important because imagine having to lie, like as an adult, to your supervisor, right? It doesn't make any sense, and it's also about survival. And why would folks want to work at a place where they have to survive? Like we have to survive in the world, and then come to a workplace where we have to survive. And so I'm also thinking about like micromanaging and people like having to have their people in the office so that I can see that they're doing work. And that's really not, that shouldn't be a thing because I can literally be sitting next to you and be wasting your company time. And studies also show that people who are able to work from home get more work done and they get it done more often and they're willing to do the work, right? So if I have the flexibility to work remote without having to um, worry about, oh, I have to move my mouse because it looks like I'm working and it looks like I'm doing stuff. Um, you can really waste company time literally sitting right next to, your executive director. So yeah.
Yeah, trying to track
So
someone's time per
yeah,
hour
supportive
per
leadership
minute.
is
Yeah,
good. It's
yeah,
it's amazing to be a part of. And so, like you said, it makes you want to go to work. It makes you want to do the work and be a team player, and all those kinds of things.
thanks, Nesting.
Mhm.
So, what else creates a healthy work environment? It's really about, like I said, there is no, and when I resonate with the way that he said that, you're not the boss. Nobody wants to, you're not the boss of me. Well, a 5-year-old will tell you that thing. You're not the boss of me, mom.
Mhm.
Like, nobody wants to be bossed. They want leadership. And I think so. Big part of leadership is making sure that everyone has a voice, right? That you're centering voices that matter, and that's your staff. Everybody's involved in the decision making. When we do policies, like in Wakasa, no one person creates the policy. In fact, leadership doesn't even create the policy. I've sat on committees where it was us as employees bringing it to leadership for the final review. So we created the policies. Sarah created the parental policy for Wakasa. And so really it's about staff being involved in those decision making. How does this impact our work? What does it look like culturally? Um, let's take a team-based approach when we're talking about policy development, um, and asking for staff feedback and having them review it before we implement it because we may have forgotten something, or did we include everything that we could in this policy? So shared decision making in overall in a workplace is very healthy, and it creates ownership and more morale within any business, whether that's I told you I came from the business of back, like business. Um, Thinking about that, like if you feel like you're a part of the organization, and really included in that decision making. You feel ownership in that, right? So you take pride in coming to work and doing the job the best that you could because it's yours. It's you feel like you're a part of that. So it's really important. So staff expertise and lived experiences need to be valued. So unique and creative wellness practices, thinking outside of the box. What does a pet-friendly workplace look like? Can you bring your dog to work? What does a decompression space look like? We work in a really, and I have a decompression policy, so we have some template policies that are pretty cool that are matching some of the things that we're seeing. That doesn't cost anything, right? It doesn't cost your organization one dime to create a healthy work environment or healthy work practices. So thinking about a quiet space for grounding and emotional regulation. Do you have something that, and I put those little rocks in the water. Like I had one in my office that literally had water around because like we in our even in our clan systems, there's like water folks, there's the sturgeon clan, there's water. So even a part of our cultural, we would have water and things. So if you're just to go and listen to water or be near water, we're 1 block away from the Lake Superior, one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. Allow for someone to walk down to the beach and sit and decompress, thinking outside of the box. Wellness hours, flexible scheduling, or shortened work weeks. Um, we know that some of our cases just are emotionally tolling, right? They're tough. Recognize that as a leader and say, hey, I know you've had a really tough week. Why don't you just go home? Why don't you just go home? And that could be for an hour early. That could be for a half a day. Allow that release and allow for that time. So thinking about stretch breaks and walking, and I know one of my like that is healing. For some folks, they really need to like exercise, go for a walk, pace, do whatever they need. That's a form of healing. So low cost practices that demonstrate beyond words that you care is really important. And then really important, I think, especially in our work, is recognizing of secondary trauma and how high that emotional labor is. Um, like I said, permission to step away after a crisis call. Just take a breath, take a moment, get your head back together, get your emotions back together after a really intense crisis call. Having reflective supervision, like where you can go and talk to someone, your supervisor, about like how that impacted you. Some of us say like, our own trauma, our own past may impact the work that we do. Allowing time for just someone to come in your office and listening, and having that open door policy where you can just come in at any time and just talk, just talk. Avoiding a culture of urgency or overworking or constant availability. Um, I know we have a busy work, but there is time where you just need to stop and care, right? Care about staff, care about that grounding, care about that trauma. And practicing grounding and safety, trust is really important. Choice, not forcing someone to take a break. Because sometimes people need to work to get away from the stress. I know that sounds weird, but if the stress is at home, they want to go work, right? So allowing the choice to the staff of what that looks like is really important too. Oh, you're muted, Nestic.
Just kidding. um, so we often talk about cultural center practices and policies, and we want to keep those things in mind. I know a lot of times there's few BIPOC staff on your roster, and sometimes that happens, but other times we want to be thinking about policies that honor cultural and spiritual practices. Justine talked a lot about how in many BIPOC spaces we are communal living. And so I often use me as an example. In my community, I am the Black sexual assault lady. Um, and that's just what it is. And so when there are people are comfortable coming up to me and expressing maybe something that happened to them. They don't care if we are in aisle 6 at the Woodman's. My colleagues get to turn it off from 9 to 5, 8 to 4, 7 to 3. It is a 24-hour job for me working in a sexual assault field. So again, could be at Woodman's aisle 6, trying to mind my business, but because I live in a community and we practice our cultural practice is communal living. If something happens, they're going to send their child, their cousin, they're going to come themselves to me. And so honoring those spaces. And so if somebody comes in and was like, yeah, I was late because had a call, whatever, we are not micromanaging and thinking that they're trying to be late on purpose or they're lying and things like that. Um, being able to choose those holidays and what those holidays look like, oftentimes, or if I am if I don't have it, if I don't practice any religion and I don't need, so if I don't need, Christmas off, but I might want a random Tuesday after a long meeting and that be honored, right? We talked about ceremonial and traditional practices, respecting the diverse family structure. Again, maybe a person is adopting and what that looks like versus someone who is having a childbirth, because we don't get to choose what family looks like, or we shouldn't be choosing what family looks like. Um, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and my friends, we did not come from the same parent, right? It just was a cultural thing. And my friends' kids are my nieces and nephews, and I might be on their emergency, not might, I am on their emergency contact list. And oftentimes I will be called to come and pick the children up because I have flexibility and I am what I call a community auntie. And I don't have to explain to my colleagues or my coworkers of like, oh, that's my sister's son. It's really my sister's son. We don't have the same parents as my sister from another mister, and I'm going to pick him up because he's sick, or whatever the case is. And so respecting what family and caregivers roles look like, and culturally centered practices and promoting belonging and retention. Again, if I'm comfortable at work, I'm always willing to maybe go the extra mile because I'm comfortable at work. Like I don't have to lie. Some days I just, the grief of losing my mother might be taking a hold of me. And I don't have to say, I'm sick today and I'm gonna take the day off. I can just go to my colleagues and be like, grief is taking a hold of me today. And if you need me, I'll see you tomorrow. I have such and such emails to go, and I didn't get to my part, and I don't have to say, I'm lying about not getting to my part. I can just really say like, yep, I'm having a bad day today. I didn't get to my part of it, but I'll get to it tomorrow or the next day. And my colleagues will either handle it or say, you know what, I got you. I'll do whatever part that you need, and we'll see you tomorrow. And so being in an organization like that makes me want to make sure that I'm being a team player, right? And so also my colleagues can say the same thing, and I can say, you know what, we can push the meeting back. We'll get to it when we get to it if it's not pressing. So um, the retention part, we often see how it is a revolving door of sexual assault and domestic violence programs and advocates. And so if we're trying to think about how we can retain because we know people aren't doing this for the money, right? We know that. We know that they're doing it for the love, for the community, for, wanting to, help out. And so sometimes people will do that. And if, as long as I'm feeling like I belong here, I'm willing to do what I need to do in order to stay. Next slide.
So let's get to the bottom of what does make staff stay, right? Are we checking in with our organization to say what makes you stay? Um, is this a healthy work environment? And I know that and I'm going to come up on my annual review too. That we do the practices that are just kind of like what we've always done. We'll do an annual review and ask a employee, but as leadership, um, instead of waiting until people leave, we do a lot of organizations will do exit interviews. But are we doing an interview about why are you staying here? What makes this a good place to come to work? Um, so checking in, like asking your staff once or twice a year, what makes you stay? What drains you? Um, what would make your job more sustainable? Are you doing a good job in leadership, right? Are you doing evaluations on your leadership on you? Um, think like in even bigger organizations, I had one organization say that you know you're not afraid to ask the question if you're trying to be a good leader. So this organization would send out yearly anonymous, and they had really unique ways of making sure they didn't know who, so they wouldn't let it'd have to be hand typed, right? Or computer typed. It wasn't handwritten. They had computer type, no name, no disclosure, a safe place outside of the workplace that they could drop evaluations of what the management could do to improve the workplace. Were there policies that they could create? Were there things that leadership could do and to make the environment more sustainable and more so do you evaluate this thinking about moving forward? It's beyond the policies, right? Great, creating the policies is one thing, but it's really living, walking, and talking and breathing that environment that creates retention, right? Like Sarah started off in the beginning, I think we can circle back and right back to that. Are you creating something that impacts your survivors in a more healthy, sustainable way? Are you creating an environment to create retention? Are you creating staff that are empowered to go home and not exhausted after work, that they can manage their families? That has impacts beyond we even know. When even thinking about what Sarah talked about with the parental leave, do you know, like literally I worked in high risk prenatal, and literally your brain for the first 5 years of your life create neurological pathways, literally your brain's developing, creating good pathways. And there's so many studies on this about like not being touched at a young age and what you grow up emotionally like, or being hugged a lot, or having someone hold you or breastfeed you, or that human touch. We're learning more and more about beyond that, like there's actual science behind being able to be home with your children and hug your children and take care of them and hold them lasts beyond it lasts the entire lifetime. Those neurological pathways are built for life. They don't change, right? So if you didn't have that at a young age, that supportive system, then it's supportive environment, then it impacts you for the rest of your life. So it's thinking about what we can do to create a work environment goes beyond what we can even imagine, that community, right? What happens if we create this big, great workplace? It impacts our family. If you go home in a good mood, and it impacts your home life, right? If you go home and you work for a place where it's hard to go to work and you've been then traumatized at work, and it's difficult and you go home and you complain about it, it impacts relationships, it impacts community beyond what we can even imagine. So I think that that was the point that we really thought about with this project is trying to create flexibility, trying to center culture, trying to create an environment that, and thinking beyond what does our field look like? How are we being supportive and with our staff? And so beyond even this project, we did create template policies to kind of show you examples of some of that out of box thinking, but we didn't create them all. There's even more beyond the templates that we have. And so I think it's important to really move this forward into action.
So as Justine mentioned, we didn't just want to throw this webinar at folks. We wanted to make useful tools for folks to actually utilize and put, we hope, some of these policies into place at their organization. So we have mocked up templates. Templates are available. They are available on our website. And we are in the process of creating even more templates. We have our paid policy templates available right now, and the zero cost workplace wellness and staff retention policies will also be going up on the website very shortly. What you can expect and what you will get out of these templates includes the policy type, an explanation of the purpose and what the policy really accomplishes, tips on how to implement it within your organization, a list of key components, what's the most important elements to ensure that we are including when we're drafting this, and then some sample language, some boilerplate verbiage that you could take and adopt to put into your own handbook if you're just lost on where to start or would really like an example of what does this actually look like in black and white if we were to implement this at our agency. We provide that sample language for you. We'll also be sharing these templates out with the recording of this webinar on our listserv, we can put it on the director's shared drive. We want these to be available to all of you. And something that I want to name, it matters having this written down at your agency. Studies show that amorphous, undefined leave is not usually taken by employees. So if you have a workplace that says, oh, you can take the kind of leave that you want, it's not really defined, folks are less likely to reach out and ask to use that resource because it's alluded to, but it doesn't feel tangible, doesn't actually feel accessible. Not only that, I think it matters to have it written down because you can back it up to show, to Justine's point, that you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. If I'm interviewing with a potential workplace and I know that I want to start a family soon, and I ask them, what kind of benefits or flexibility do you provide to parents, to families? What does that look like for all of you? And they don't have a policy to point to of here's how we support our team members who are busy parents, who have full family lives, who are caregivers, right? If they don't have something like that to point to, can I take them just at their word, right? Having it written down shows me that they mean it. I have something to point to as a team member to know that this is true, this is authentic, this is a genuine commitment to supporting me and my fellow colleagues. So having it available in your handbook does matter, right? We want this to be accessible to your team and to really reflect and reinforce the values that you as a workplace are trying to uphold and support. And that brings us to the end. Thank
I
you
would
all
like to
so.
say,
Oh,
just before we get to the end of that, just knowing that, like beyond this webinar, WCASA is here to help organizations like
mm,
move this into action. Like we could come to with individual organizations and help develop and model, if you need us to help, develop policies and put this into action with you, or that's the part of right that's really part of our direct assistance and that we provide. And so don't think that we're not afraid to like come into your organizations and like really help you develop some of these really unique and really creating those really healthy work environments is really important. So we'd love to come and do that. Like that, ask us over. We have them. We have some templates. We can create more. We wanted to make sure that these are put into action. So reach out to any one of us, and we would certainly like to help you directly put these into action.
Yes, you are welcome to reach out to any of us. As Justine said, our contact information is there. I'm going to hit stop record so that if folks have questions, we can get to those. But thank you all so much for your time, for attending. Let me go ahead and hit stop record.